Good afternoon, everyone. I guess I see Mr. Min's on. We will start shortly. It's on my clock 5:58, so give it 2, maybe 3 minutes at the most, and we'll begin.
Okay, sir. Good afternoon.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ms. Bain. Good afternoon, Ms. Curry. We'll be starting shortly. 2 minutes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, shall we begin? Let me make sure I can share my screen with you. I trust you all can see that. Hopefully you had a good day today. Last class, we ended looking at what we thought are some of the possible criteria for a good tax system. The kind of stuff that's been discussed with economists for a very long time, and we thought we'll take a stab at it ourselves. And we think I'm putting forth to you that a good tax system should have three broad criteria. One, we think it should be fair. And we'll talk about exactly what we mean by fair. It should be easy to understand regardless of your education level. And it shouldn't change the way you purchase goods and services. It should not distort your choices. It should not make you choose one brand over another brand. You should not have to give up your favorite brand because of the tax policy. So when we're talking about fair, you said, okay, if we're talking about fair, there are three approaches to fairness, if you will. One is what we call the benefit tax approach. And this is where we said persons who gain the most, who benefit the most from this product or service should pay the highest taxes relative to that product or service. They're getting the most out of the deal, so they should be the ones contributing the most. A number of persons, including yourselves, have poked holes in this, but as a broad theme, as a general concept, you can see how one may argue that this is fair. For example, if you are, say, I don't know, the hypochondriac person who, anytime you brush up against something, you rush to the hospital. And since you're going PMH as opposed to doctors, we as taxpayers are paying for this every time your child has a sniffle. Well, what if you were the one paying more than the rest of us, those of us who very rarely have ever visited the hospital? Maybe we shouldn't pay as much in taxes as everybody else, especially those of you who are always there, perhaps. So one approach is the benefit tax approach. The second approach is what we call horizontal equity. And in the horizontal equity approach, we're suggesting that people in similar financial circumstances should pay the same tax, or similar professions should pay the same tax. So people who live in the same neighborhood should pay the same tax. Right? People who, all doctors pay the same tax, all lawyers pay the same tax. Right? So the horizontal equity approach says people in similar circumstances should pay the same tax. On the other hand, the vertical equity approach says people who make more money should pay more taxes. And the argument is, usually by poor people, is that, well, rich people can afford it. Well, there's a reason why they became rich in the first place. But at the very least, you can see the argument for why people may think the vertical equity approach is fair. The more money you make, the more taxes you pay. We do see this in a lot of countries that have an income tax system, where people who make very little pay almost no income tax at all, and the more money you make, the more taxes you pay, both in absolute terms, but also in percentage terms. So as a quick example, you have, say, someplace like, I don't know, Norway, Sweden, Finland, the Northern European countries, who have a very, what they call progressive tax system. So for the first $20,000 you make, or the equivalent, you pay no taxes. But say for the next $10,000, so you pay nothing on the first 20,000. The next 10,000, you may pay 10%. On the next 15,000 above that 10,000, you may pay 20%. The next 20,000 above that, you may pay 50%. And anything above that, you may pay 80%. So you may have, let's say, somebody making $250,000. The first $20,000 of their income, they pay nothing. All right? But the next 10,000 of that, the next 20,000 of 50,000, and then anything above that, they pay 80%. Right? So you can see how it would be progressive, and persons who are making more money, as you move up the economic ladder, you find your income tax rate going up. All right. So we said, fairness, one possibility. We also said it should be simple, easy to understand. And the advantage of a simple tax system is not only is it easy for your citizens to understand, regardless of their income levels, it also makes it easy to administer. So it's easy to collect the tax. It also makes it very difficult for people to avoid paying the tax, either legal or illegal. A legal, not paying the tax from a legal perspective, so you're manipulating the laws to benefit you, is called tax avoidance. So you get a really good CPA or somebody, and you pay them, to find every loophole there is in the tax system. And that's perfectly legal, called tax avoidance. But when you decide that you're going to cross a line and deliberately hide your income from the tax authorities, that's called tax evasion. So you want a tax system that's simple, easy to understand, easy to administer, hard to avoid or evade. And finally, you want a tax system that's non-distortionary. Tax system that doesn't change consumers' preferences, consumers' choices about the goods and services that they're willing to consume. All right. So we said for a good tax system, it should be fair, should be simple, it should not distort our choices. All right. Now, today we're going to go on a completely different direction. We want to begin talking about demand, supply, and market equilibrium. We'll see how far we get today, and this probably can cover at least a couple of classes. Every business, economics, finance course that you would ever take, demand and supply is going to be foundation to those courses. Any business course, any banking course, any finance course, you're going to do your MBA, demand, supply, and market equilibrium are going to be the foundation of all the discussion going forward. So we want to make sure that we get this right. We want to make sure we understand precisely all the terminology involved, how this works in any kind of economy, whether it's a market-based economy, a socialist economy, or a communist economy. Demand, supply, and market equilibrium are still applicable. Governments try to get around them, subvert them, but these are foundational elements on how we approach our consumption of goods and services. Okay, so what we're going to talk about, we're going to look at demand first, and we're going to make sure we understand exactly what we mean, the proper definition of demand for a good or service. We're going to specify what the law of demand says and what it doesn't say. We're going to look at a demand schedule, how it's constructed. We're going to look at a demand curve, and we're going to construct a demand function. A demand schedule, a demand curve, and a demand function is just three different ways of looking at the exact same information. We're going to look at factors, and that should be factors, not factor. We put in the S. We're going to look at factors and that affect demand. And very crucially, we can look at a difference between these very technical terms, change in demand versus change in quantity demanded. Then we can do the same for supply. What does it mean? What we mean when we're properly defining the term supply of a good or service, the law of supply schedules, curve, and function, factors that affect supply, and very technically, change in supply versus change in quantity supplied. Once we've gone through those definitions, then we're going to look at market equilibrium and how demand and supply interact to determine the price that we're going to see in the market and the quantity of goods and services that will be demanded by the consumers and supplied by firms. And like I said, if we do it right, this should take us probably at least certainly this class and probably into next class as well. But we'll see how it goes. Okay, so let's start with demand. First of all, we must be clear. In order for there to be demand for a good to technically what we mean when we talk about demand, all three must be satisfied. First of all, in order for there to be demand for a good or service, an individual must be prepared to consume that good or service at that time. A possible future interest in the consumption of a good or service does not constitute demand for that good or service today. At some point in the future, you think you want to have your own home. That's nice, that's lovely, that's a good dream, but you do not have a demand for a home or a house today. Now, you may have a demand for a house somewhere in the future, but when we're talking about demand, it has to be a good or service that you want at that time. So the first criteria, in order for there to be demand for a good or service, you must be prepared to consume that good or service at that time. Secondly, you cannot have a demand for a good or service that you don't want. That is, you have to have a willingness or a desire to consume that good or service. There cannot be a demand for a product that you have no interest in consuming. I'm a man. I know I'm a man because, well, I checked. I have no interest in consuming feminine hygiene products. No desire whatsoever. They don't do anything for me. I have no use for them. So I could never have a demand for that product because I have no desire to consume that good or service. Similarly for, I don't know, I have no desire for the service of a gynecologist. And finally, the third criteria that must be satisfied if we're going to have demand for a good or service, you must have the ability, the financial capability of acquiring that good or service. There cannot be a demand for a product that you're unable to afford to purchase. I know you want that brand new, I don't know, whatever you want to drive, right? If you're like me, I like luxury. Some people want speed, fine. Some people just want a new car because the old one's been giving them out. Want that now. So you are perfectly ready to consume that product at that time. So the readiness criteria is satisfied. Do you want a car? Hell yeah, you want a car. So you're ready for that car and you're willing to have that car in your life. But you're broke. I mean, you ain't even got the down payment. You're flat broke. So you could want that car as much as you want. You wouldn't want that car now. But if you don't have the money for the car, technically speaking, as far as we're concerned, you do not have a demand for a new vehicle. And this is one of the first things that they want to correct in people's minds. Wanting something is not enough to constitute a demand for a product or service. So we can shorthand the criteria for demand for a good or service by saying you must be ready, willing, and able to consume that good or service. So in order for that to be demand for a good or service, one must be ready, willing, and able. Two out of the three is not going to do it. Give you another example. Let's say, I don't know, you were leaving work. Well, I can't say that no more because most people are working from home now. But back in the good old days when all of us actually went into the office, you hear that, price of gas going up $5 per gallon. So it's going up from about $4 and change now to about $9. Now, you got gas in your car, enough to get you around, and you weren't really planning on getting gas before you heard this announcement. Right? So you had the ability, so you have the money for a full tank of gas. All right. And you're certainly willing to buy gas because you're going to need gas for your car. But prior to the announcement, you were not ready to consume a full tank of gas. You had the ability. Right? You always want gas in your car because that keeps it going, but you weren't ready. What changed? The announcement that price of gas is going up made you more prepared to consume that good or service at that time, whereas you weren't prepared previously. So you see how when you talk about demand, you have to be able to satisfy all three of those criteria simultaneously for there to be demand for a good or service. All right, let us continue. Unless people have a question or an argument about our criteria, and they think somehow it's possible to have demand without satisfying all three of these criteria simultaneously, by all means, let me know. All right, then we want, from a very technical and practical perspective, define what we mean by the law of demand. The law of demand says, all other things being equal, remember our ceteris paribus assumption, that if you focus on one thing and one thing only, as the biggest factor affecting your decision. So the law of demand says, if you ignore everything else and you only focus on the price, an increase in the price of a good or service will lead to a decline in the quantity demanded of that good or service. And similarly, a decrease in the price of a good or service will lead to an increase in the quantity demanded of that good or service. So if the law of demand says all other things being equal, so if we ignore everything else that may affect our decision, when they raise that price, we're gonna want fewer of the good or service that they have put on the shelf. And when they have a sale, we're gonna wanna buy more. When price goes up, we can buy less. When price goes down, we can buy more. And if you see the little table that I put over on the right, you can see P is for price and Q subscript D is quantity demanded. And see, as price goes up from $0 to $5, quantity demanded goes from 20 down to 0. And by the time they start charging us $5 for this item, we decide, you know what, that's too rich for my blood. So the law of demand, in its simplest form, says that all other things being equal, if price goes up, quantity demanded goes down, and as price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. Now you would note that I am saying quantity demanded and not just demand. That's important, and we're going to come to a reason why that's important later, but we want to make sure our terminology is correct. And our terminology says it should be quantity demanded and not just demand. Okay, so that's the law of demand. Price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. When price goes down, quantity demanded goes up if we ignore anything else that may affect our decision, ceteris paribus. Then we have the demand schedule, and that's what you see over on the right. That's a demand schedule. A demand schedule is simply a list of prices and associated quantities demanded. Demand schedule is just simply a list of prices and associated quantities demanded. The demand schedule usually comes from a survey. So what happens, Department of Statistics sends out its people every week. And each of their surveyors would have a printout, a list of stores that they're going to visit and products they're going to survey. And they would survey large mega stores like Solomon's and SuperValue, all the way down to mom and pop stores. Right? And each surveyor would survey the same stores every week, right? And the same products every week. Right? So let's say one item on their list is, I don't know, Joy dish detergent, 12-ounce bottle, right? So they may have 50 or 60 products, but let's look at the one of their product, Joy dish detergent, 12-ounce bottle. So they go into Solomon's and says, okay, what's the price this week of your Joy dish detergent 12-ounce bottle, and how many bottles of this did you sell this week? So they end up with a price and the amount that they have sold during the course of that week. Then they go to a different store and ask the exact same question. What is your price for 12-ounce bottle of Joy dish detergent, and how many bottles did you sell this week? And they may do that for, say, 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 stores. And if you have, say, 30 or 40 surveyors, you can see where that will all add up to, a few thousand stores, and each of them asking about 12-ounce bottle of Joy dish detergent. Each store prices its 12-ounce bottle of Joy dish detergent slightly differently. Because it's not a price control item, stores can price it however they want. Right? And they're saying, okay, some stores have it priced relatively low compared to other stores. So all the surveyor is looking for is a list of the prices, various prices for Joy dish detergent, and how much Joy dish detergent is sold at each of those various prices. Comes back to Department of Statistics, plug all that information into the computer, and it spills out a demand schedule. Much more complicated and involved than ours, so we've simplified ours very much. So for example, all of our product is priced in whole dollar numbers. This is not 99 cents, 93 cents, 259. We're using whole numbers, but you get the idea. And what you would see when you look at the demand schedule for any product, for any normal good, and I put that in quotation mark, we can talk about those in a moment, you will see as the price creeps up for those products, the demand, the number of items being sold, because you can't sell what people are not demanding. I mean, you can stock it, you can supply it, but you can't sell what people are not demanding. So, and you will see that the amount of Joy dish detergent being sold falls as the price goes up. The law of demand insists that that happens. As the price goes up, fewer and fewer bottles of Joy dish detergent is going to be sold. And at some point, we will recognize that beyond some price, no bottles are sold. Let's say, for example, outrageously, some store decide that I am going to sell my 12-ounce bottle of Joy dish detergent for $19.99. Everybody who walks in that store looks at that price and thinks, are you out of your flipping mind? There's no way I'm paying $19.99. Even though I live in life at Key, I'm not paying $19.99 for a 12-ounce bottle of Joy dish detergent when I could go right down the road and get it for $4.99. Hell no. So demand at that price would be zero. And that would apply to every product. So you would have a demand schedule for every single product. And it's simply a list of prices and associated quantities demanded. So far, we've had a definition of demand. We've looked at what the law of demand says. We've looked at the demand schedule. And demand schedule is just a list of prices and quantity. Then we have what is called a demand curve. A demand curve is just simply, we took this demand schedule and we graphed it. Excuse me, demand schedule has price and quantity as its two variables. So we put price and quantity on an axis. So we got a graph sheet. I know I've been seeing graph paper since primary school. I don't know if they even still make it, yeah, but you certainly could do this in Excel. And if you recall, going back to, I don't know, your 7th or 8th grade in high school, where you had to you learned about graphing, you would remember that on the vertical axis is the y-axis, and on the horizontal axis is the x-axis. Right? And that's this here. Let's see if I can make it bigger. I'm going to return it to its previous location in a moment, but I just made it bigger so we can see what it looks like. Let's go back. Here's our demand. Let me see if I can copy that. Copy that. And can I put it here? All right. I'm going to clean everything back up in a second. But what you would see immediately is that you can graph this. So you have a point on this line where price is 0 and quantity demand is 20. Here's that point here, 20, 0. We always put X first and then Y if you're graphing any line. It's just convention. I know you're trying to remember all the way back to 7th, 8th grade in high school. Or is it junior high? Depending on which school you went to, I guess. When the price went up to $1, quantity fell to 16. So another point in the graph is 116 or 16.1. When the price went up to $2, demand fell to 12 units. That's why at 12.2. When the price went up to $3, demand fell 8 units, 8.3, 4.4, and 5.0. So we end up with all of these points on our graph, and we just connected the points with a line. And now we call this, when you connect that, we call it our demand curve. So all we did is we took this demand schedule and we graphed it. So a demand curve is nothing more than a graphical representation of our demand schedule. Let me see if I can restore everything back to where it was. Good. All right. So a demand curve is simply a graphical representation of the demand schedule. And it is accomplished by plotting the points of the demand schedule as indicated on the graph to your right. Things that we want to note about our demand schedule. The demand schedule, not just this demand schedule, any demand schedule, every demand schedule is always downward sloping. Downward sloping just simply means it starts high on the left and becomes lower and lower as you go to the right. The demand curve is always downward sloping because of the law of demand. The law of demand says, let me see if I can go back to it. The law of demand says as price goes up, quantity goes down, and as price goes down, quantity goes up. So at a high price, very few items are sold. Price is on the vertical axis, on the y-axis. Quantity is on the horizontal axis. So you can see as the price goes up higher and higher and higher, the quantity demanded goes down. And at a very high price, quantity falls to 0. At a price of $4, quantity falls slightly less. As price goes to $3, price goes to $2, quantity goes up a little bit more. Price goes to $1, quantity goes up even further. And at a price of 0, quantity goes to 20. We're going to discuss that in a second because those points are important. Let me see if I can fix my thing back to where it was. I hope I didn't mess it up. Okay, good. All right. So the demand curve is just taking the demand schedule and graphing it. And all we're trying to remember is the demand curve is always downward sloping. So demand curves are easy to recognize because you know they're going to be downward sloping. And price and quantity go in opposite directions. They are negatively or inversely related. So the technical terms are they are negatively related or they're inversely related. As price goes up, demand goes down. As price goes down, demand goes up. Price and quantity always go in the opposite direction when we're talking about demand. So price and quantity demanded are negatively or inversely related. When it comes to demand curve, things we're keeping in mind, one, the demand curve is always downward sloping, and two, price and quantity demanded go in opposite direction. They're negatively or inversely related. Oh, actually, I could have just shown you guys this instead of playing around with and messing up my graphs. Okay. The demand function takes the same information from this demand schedule and puts it in a functional form. So the demand function shows the functional or mathematical relationship between prices and quantities demanded. So the demand function shows the functional or mathematical relationship between the price that they're charging and how much people would actually want to buy. And we say the demand function perfectly describes and defines the demand curve. When we say perfectly describes and defines the demand curve, that is, the demand function tells us everything we can possibly need to know about that curve. So you look at this curve, downward sloping, it touches the vertical axis here, and it touches the horizontal axis at 20, vertical axis at 5, horizontal axis at 20, and it has this particular downward sloping shape. We're saying if we know how to read the demand function would tell us everything we could possibly want to know about this curve. So the demand function shows the functional or mathematical relationship between price and quantities demanded. The demand function, perfectly describes and defines the demand curve. The demand function will tell us where the curve touches both the horizontal or x-axis as well as the vertical or y-axis, and it will tell us how steep or how flat the slope of that demand curve is. So the demand function, once we understand exactly how to read it, will tell us exactly where our demand curve touches our horizontal axis, where our demand curve touches our vertical axis, and it will tell us how steep or how flat that curve is. Okay, in order for us to do that, let us go about step-by-step constructing this demand function. Now I put a fully constructed demand function up here, and I am suggesting to you that this demand function came from this demand schedule. I am putting forth to you, and I'll hopefully prove it in a moment, that I can use this demand schedule and come up with that demand function, so that whether you're looking at the schedule, the curve, or the function, we're still talking about the exact same set of information. Okay, so how do we go about doing this? Step by step. This is just the theoretical step for constructing a demand function. You will never be asked to actually construct a demand function. No, it's a summer. maybe if you guys want to come back and do this in the fall, we'll have much more fun playing with the math. But nobody ever takes me up on that. Anyway, fine.
Yeah, man, we can do that. That sounds solid.
You speaking for everybody?
Yes, my learned
Yeah, man.
brother, my learned brother, speak for thyself. This is a democratic society.
Fine. So all you need to do is fail this class and then take it again in the fall. Right? And we will play.
No.
What do you know? You just said.
I mean, I only spoke for the ones who didn't want to speak.
No, that was a setup.
Oh, so now you're changing up your mouth.
No, I didn't
Epic.
change. Technically, I didn't change up my mode because I didn't claim to that.
Fine. All right. Because we're doing the summer and it's relatively short and it's a lot we want to cover, we will walk through the construction of the demand function, but you won't be required to do this on your own for either homework or an exam. Right? But it is good to know how it's constructed. All right. So some mathematical stuff first. Not calculations, just mathematical identity. In any mathematical function, as a mathematical identity, if you have two variables and you stick an equal sign between the two variables, and we have a quantity that people want to buy, quantity demanded, and a price, two different variables. First of all, you stick an equal sign between them, and we said, we are going to make these two variables equal to each other. We're going to establish a mathematical identity between these two variables. So first things first, I want to make sure I have everything in place. Yes. All right. As a mathematical identity, the equality function says that there is some association between P and Q. So the demand function separates the two variables with an equal sign. So first thing you see, Q is on one side and P is on the other side of the equal sign. First things first. Secondly then, we're looking at cause and effect. What is the cause and what is the effect in our relationship? In our relationship, the price is the cause, and how much people are going to buy is going to be the effect. So depending on what you price this item, that is going to have an effect on how much of this item that you're going to sell. I hope that makes sense. All right. The price then is what we said is the independent variable. The price is entirely controlled by the merchant, by the store owner. And once he sets his price, then he is subject, he no longer has any control over how much people are going to buy. Because the amount that's going to be demanded and sold depends on what price he's charging, then the amount that's going to be demanded, QD, is said to depend on the price. It's the dependent variable. Right. Somebody has their audio still on. Check it for me, please. I'm getting some feedback. Appreciate it. All right. So what we're saying is that the price is the independent variable, and the quantity demanded, the amount that's being sold, is going to depend on what that price happens to be. If there's a high price, fewer items are going to be sold, and if it's a low price, more items are going to be sold. So because the amount that's demanded and sold, what we call quantities demanded, depends on what the price is that is prevailing in the marketplace, QD is said to be the dependent variable, and mathematical variable is always to the left of the equal sign if you have an equation. Dependent variable is always to the left of the equal sign. Your independent variable is always to the right. So because price is determined in the marketplace and is not limited to a specific value, the merchant can set whatever price he wants. the price is said to be an independent variable, and mathematically, it must be to the right of the equal sign. So, first off, we needed an equal sign to associate these two variables. Right? We're saying there is some relationship between price and quantity. So we know they're separated by the equal sign. Which goes where depends on what is dependent and what is independent. Because price is independent, it goes on the right. Because Q is dependent, it goes on the left. So far, we have an equation that has Q on the left and P on the right. We haven't applied any numbers as yet. All we know so far is Q is on the left and P is on the right, and there's an equal sign in the middle. Now, for any good or service, there is a finite quantity, a limit on how much people want to buy of that product, or really a limit on the amount of product that people would want to demand, even if it was free. I know sometimes it's hard to believe, but it's true of any product. Right? So let's say, I don't know, Bahamians, we like KFC. We like various types of KFC. Some people like barbecue, some people like spicy, some people like whatever. We like KFC. We like chicken. Here's the question. If KFC had some special and they are giving away chicken free, but you got to eat it in the restaurant, you can see then there's a limit to how much that you can eat. You cannot eat an unlimited number. Now, some people, that limit may be higher than other people, because some people are gravelicious, and some people will insist upon eating until they puke, but there's a limit. Okay, fine. What if we're not talking about food? Let's say, I don't know, some appliance store says, I don't know, someone lost their minds, going out of business, and they're giving away freezers. Right. The only stipulation is that the freezers have to go to one single household. Right. So you can't say, I want 50 freezers and then turn around and sell them. They all have to reside in that one house. How many deep freezers would you want? Would you demand? 1, 2, 5? But you do realize at some point there's going to be a limit to how much you're going to want in your house. And it's the same for any product. So that limit, that finite quantity that we would demand, even if it was free, we call that the level of autonomous consumption. It's how much you would want to demand if it was free. So when you have now our mathematical function, we put the autonomous consumption amount just to the right of the equal sign. In our case, that's 20. How do we know that's 20? Let's go back to our demand schedule. Here's our demand schedule. Look at the price. When the price is 0, the most of this people are going to want to demand is 20 for this particular product. I haven't told you what this product is. I don't know what this product is. All I know is even if it was free, the most people are going to want to demand of this product is 20 units. 20 bottles, 20 boxes, 20 cases, whatever the 20 is, 20. Right? So the 20 then is our autonomous consumption. It's the level that consumers would want to demand if it was free. So when we're talking about our demand function then, right, that finite quantity, that level of autonomous consumption, we put that immediately to the right of the equal sign. So far, for our function, we know the QD is on the left, the P is on the right, equal sign in the middle, And just immediately to the right of the equal sign is our level of autonomous consumption. In our case, it's 20 because it came from our demand schedule. When price is 0, which means it's free, the most we want is 20. Now, we also said that price and quantity go in opposite direction. When price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. And when price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. And that came straight from our law of demand. The law of demand says all other things being equal, price and quantity demanded go in opposite direction. If he's raising his price, fewer and fewer items are going to be sold. If he's lowering his price, more and more items are going to be sold. And we can see that again from our demand schedule. As price goes up, quantity demanded is going down. As price is going down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, quantity demanded is going up. Price and quantity are going in the opposite direction. They are inversely related or negatively related. If we have a function, as we're trying to construct here, the way we would show that negative relationship is with a negative sign. A negative sign in a function says that the two variables go in opposite direction. The negative sign says price and quantity go in opposite direction. If price goes up, QD is going to go down. If price goes down, QD is going to go up. And you notice I'm always talking about price changing first, right? Because the price is the independent variable. It's the change in the price that in turn causes quantity demanded to change. Right? So now we have a function where we have Q on the left because it's dependent, P on the right because it's independent. We have our equal sign in the middle that says there's this relationship between the two. We have an autonomous consumption, the amount that people are going to want if it was free. And we know mathematically, we put that immediately to the right of the equal sign. And we also know that we need a negative sign in there because in this particular case, the law of demand says when price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. When price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. Price and quantity go in opposite direction, negatively related, inversely related, and we show that as a negative sign or a minus sign in our equation. Now, the only thing we haven't accounted for in our equation is that 4. Right. So the slope or steepness of the demand curve. In an equation, the slope or steepness of the demand curve we put right next to the P. Right. And that steepness or slope, whatever that number is, that tells us how much quantity demand is going to change when price changes by 1 unit. So this 4 is saying when price goes up by $1, Q goes down by 4 units. When price goes down by $1, quantity demand is going to go up by 4 units. That's what that 4 is saying. The 4, which is technically, mathematically, is called the slope or steepness of the demand curve. And it tells us how much quantity demand is going to change when the price changes by 1 unit. Now, if that's the case, then we should be able to go back to our demand schedule and see if in fact that's true. Right now, that 4 is telling us when the price changes by $1, quantity demand is going to change by 4 units in the opposite direction. So let's go back to our demand schedule. Let's see. Price went up by $1 from 0 to $1. Quantity demanded goes down by 4 units. Price goes up from $1 to $2. Quantity demanded goes down by 4 units. Okay. When price goes down from $5 to $4, quantity demanded goes up by 4 units. When price goes down from $2 to $1, quantity demanded goes up from 12 to 16, 4 units. So we can see here, anytime price changes by $1, quantity demanded goes in the opposite direction by 4 units. So that is still consistent with this slope, or that 4 that we put right in front of the P. If we had put a 2 right in front of the P, it would have said when price went up by $1, quantity demanded changed by 2 units. If we had a 3 in front of that P, we'll be saying when price went up by $1, quantity demanded would have gone down by 3 units. If we put 0.5 in front of that P, that would say when price went up by $1, demand changed by half of a unit. So as you can see then, our demand function tells us everything that we need to, our demand function comes directly from our demand, our demand function comes directly from our demand schedule. Our demand function says that P and Q goes in the opposite direction. Here's my negative sign. P and Q are related. When one changes, the other changes, but P is independent, Q is dependent. P is on the right, Q is on the left. When price is 0, when it's free, the most we want is 20. That gives us our autonomous consumption. And we already know that we can take our demand schedule and graph it and get this demand curve. So if that's the case, then we should be able to look at our demand function and get the same information from our demand to our demand curve. Oops, I went too far. So these three, whether we're talking the demand schedule, the demand function, the demand curve, or the demand function, there's just 3 different ways of looking at the exact same information. The demand schedule is a list of the prices and associated quantities demanded. The demand curve is a graphical relationship of this demand schedule. And the demand function is just simply a mathematical function of this demand schedule. 3 ways of looking at the exact same information. Very shortly, we will show how we go about using these, particularly the demand function. But for now, we want to focus on the fact that whether we're talking about the demand schedule, the demand curve, or the demand function, it's just 3 different ways of looking at the exact same information. Okay, questions? All right, fine. Our next step then is that we want to look at all the factors that may affect demand or affect consumption. Let me fix this. Okay. Now, so far, everything that we've talked about have only focused on price affecting how much people are going to want to buy. And it is true for most consumers, the price of a good or service is the primary determinant in their decision to purchase that good or service. And in fact, there are some, depending on the product, as much as 80–90% of our rationale for purchasing a good or service is going to depend on the price. However, there are other factors that may affect our decision to buy a good or service. And what we want to look at is some of these other factors that affect how much we're going to consume of this good or service. So certainly price. We understand price. We We feel for price. Price is the big dog in this, but there are other factors. First of those we're going to consider is income. For normal goods, and we're going to define normal goods in 2 seconds. For normal goods, as your income rises, demand for these goods and service also rises. Normal goods are goods when, as your income goes up, you want to consume more of those goods. And for most goods are normal goods. As income goes up, you want to consume more of those goods, regardless of the price. You consume more inexpensive products as you start feeling your money. You consume more mid-price products as your income goes up. You consume more expensive products as your income goes up. You know this because you know as you have gotten your first real job, you are starting to find a lot more things that you have to spend your money on. All of a sudden now you're getting your hair done much more frequently, and you're having somebody do your hair as opposed to you doing it. All of a sudden now you find a reason to buy a lot more shoes, a lot more clothes, a lot more entertainment. All of a sudden now you find yourself spending a lot more money on your girlfriend, because now you got a job. As your income goes up, demand for these goods and services also go up if those goods are normal goods. Now, there are some goods that we call non-normal goods, and they tend to fall into 2 categories: necessities and luxury goods. And necessities and luxury goods do not follow this rule. Necessities, think about the last stuff that's in your cupboard before you do your grocery shopping, especially if you're somebody who grocery shops, say, once a month. Right? That's usually maybe some can of tuna, maybe some canned soup, the things, that really you end up, at the very end. Right? For me, it's Campbell soup, tomato soup, vegetable soup. We got to put a gun to my head before I get around to consuming them. That's a story for another day. But the point is, you do recognize some of these. All right? If you've ever spent any time on the Family Islands, particularly, going back 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, a lot of Family Islanders are involved in sort of necessity being the mother of invention, making do as best you can because you don't have the conveniences that we have in Nassau. You would remember things like clothes made of crocus sack. You would remember things like all sorts of bush tea, dill seed tea, sour leaf tea, you name it. Bush medicine, similarly. But soon as people start making money, real jobs moving to Nassau, all of a sudden now, you're drinking Tetley tea, coffee, you have real clothes. So as your income is going up, clearly your demand for these necessities have gone down. Necessities also include things like utilities. Electricity is a real good one. You end up having to consume electricity regardless of whether or not you're working, or not. And in fact, there are 3 broad categories of necessities that fall into this. We said food, clothing, and shelter. Regardless of your income level, you do consume these products. So necessities. Luxuries, on the other hand, are just weird. Right? There are some goods where the higher the price, the more exclusive the good is, and the more people want to demand that product because of its high price. Think, I don't know, luxury cars. Think jewelry. and that sort of thing. And you get the idea, that some of these very expensive things, they're in demand, especially you have brand name stuff, they're in demand simply because they're expensive. So that you could show off with just how much you paid for this. And clearly I'm better than you because I'm able to pay more, or spend more on, whatever. So we have here where a change in demand, how much we want to buy, is going to depend on how much income we have. And as our income goes up, our demand for goods and services of all prices go up. Then we look at associated or related goods, goods that are consumed together. Sorry, there was a question, comment? Okay, so associated goods, goods that are consumed together. For associated or related goods, the demand for one good affects demand for the other good regardless of the price. And we have two types of associated goods, substitute goods and complementary goods, substitutes and complements. Substitute first is good that can be used instead of another good. You can substitute one good for the other. And I put here beef and chicken, Coke and Pepsi, comb and brush. And I know you're going to say they're not identical, and they're not supposed to be identical, but they can be substituted for the other. You know that, listen, I am not going to the food store till next week. It is now Tuesday, Wednesday. All right. You know what? Y'all gonna have to eat whatever's in the fridge that I can cook. You can tell me as much as you like, we want beef, but if I only got chicken in the fridge, we having chicken for dinner. Right. I know people have a preference between Coke and Pepsi. I'm going to tell me Coke too sweet, Pepsi too sharp. But I really love Pepsi, but I can't stand Coke. Fine. Until you go to any fast food restaurant, any fast food place in any country. They're only going to have one cola. They're going to have either Coke or Pepsi. They're never going to have both. And if you ask for Coke and they only have Pepsi, you know what they can do? They can give you Pepsi. If you want Pepsi and they only have Coke, they can give you Coke. And very, 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 very few people are going to jump out their car, go back into the fast food place and say, listen, I asked for Pepsi, y'all give me Coke. This ain't what I want. You know what happens? You can take a sip of that and screw up our face, suck our teeth, and go on with our business. You go to any club at any point in time and you want a drink, and a drink is made with a cola, they're going to use whatever cola they have. Right? Because really, as far as they're concerned, what's more important is the alcohol, not the mixer. And for most patrons, the alcohol is what's important. Right? So Coke and Pepsi are definite substitutes. Comb and brush, listen, I just want my hair to be decent, right? Because I got to go out in public. Right? So substitutes are goods that can be used instead of a particular good or service. It also means that, let's say the price of chicken hasn't changed, but the price of beef went up. You will find yourself buying less beef and more chicken, even though the price of chicken hasn't changed. Now, we all remember the law of demand says if price goes up, demand goes down, and if price goes down, demand goes up. So if demand for chicken is going down, demand for chicken is going up, you would think it would be because the price of chicken went down. But the price of chicken didn't change. Our demand for chicken changed because the price of beef went up. We would normally buy some beef, and it could be ground beef, right? It could be steaks, it could be roast, whatever it is, right? They're gonna raise the price of beef so much, and we decide, you know what? We're gonna have to eat chicken. We're gonna have to eat more chicken. That's all there is to it. Similarly, if you have, you find some places, you don't see very many around here, but in a lot of countries, you have two vending machines next to each other. One has Pepsi products, one has Coke products. And if each machine, Coke and Pepsi are priced at the same price, $1 or whatever, we choose the one that we like, and that's what we go with. But if there was a significant difference in the price in those machines, at the very least, we stop and try and decide whether or not our more expensive preference is worth it. Substitutes. On the other hand, complementary goods are goods which are used in conjunction with one another. For a complementary good, demand for one good depends on the demand for another good, regardless of the price. Okay. See if I can come up with, I know a good example. Aunt Jemima pancake batter and pancake syrup. I don't know about your house, but in my house, and when I was growing up in my parents' house, it was the same. And most of the houses in my family is the same. So I'm assuming, since my family is not weird or anything, it probably applies to most Bahamian families. The syrup only goes on the pancakes. If you use up the pancake batter, that pancake syrup sits in the door of the fridge. That's it. Right. There's some weird people out there who may put it in their tea or something, but no, they just odd. It sits in the fridge until you get some more pancake batter. And if you go into the supermarket, into the food store, right, and you're shopping for pancake syrup or pancake batter, if you decide, you know what, the batter is too expensive, they're gonna raise the price too fast, too quick, I ain't getting that, there is no incentive for you to buy the syrup. Your demand for the syrup falls only because your demand for the batter fell. Your demand for the batter fell because they raised the price. All right, a clear law of demand. They raise the price, you buy less. But you're also buying less syrup, even though they didn't do nothing with the price of syrup. Your demand for syrup fell because your demand for its complementary good, which is the batter, that fell. So for complementary goods, because we consume them together, if there's a change in demand for one, there's a change in demand for the other, even if the price doesn't change. Population. Again, we're talking about factors that affect how much we're willing to consume, factors that affect demand. As the number of persons interested in consuming that good or service rises, then demand for that good or service also rises. Okay? No deep thinking involved here, no straining analysis, no hurting your brain. More people want to buy a product, demand for that product has gone up. Let's say government finally decides to move ahead with offering free education, higher education, college education at UB and other institutions like BIFS for Bahamian students, free tuition. Do you expect demand for books, textbooks to go up? Absolutely. Because the number of persons enrolled went up, demand for everything associated with education is going to go up because more people are going to go to college. More people are going to go to college, more people are going to want to buy this stuff regardless of the price. Think about it. There's going to be some people, even though the education is free, they're coming from a less advantaged socioeconomic background. So they may be looking for, let's say, used textbooks at a lower price. There are going to be people who, from a more advantageous background, going to be looking at new textbooks because they can afford it. So the demand for all textbooks at all prices is going to go up because there are more students, and more students are going to want more textbooks. So regardless of, yes. Okay, maybe I'm getting a little bit too excited. You know, we had World War II, ended in 1947, right? Then we have the baby boom generation. And yes, there was a correlation between the end of the war and all of these people getting knocked out. Right? War ended. Let's look at the United States just by itself. There was approximately 7 million American men, because you know this is 40s, so women didn't go to war. 7 million American men who were killed in the war or were made invalid to the point where they were unable to have children. 7 million. That the war lasted 4 years, 5 years, give or take. Right? So all it meant is that all the women in the United States who were at least 14 years of age when the war kicked off, who would now be at least 18, they're looking for husband. All the women who lost husbands in the war, died, are now looking for husbands too. So you have a man shortage, right, of epic proportions. Now, remember, this is the 1940s, so there was no obvious man trying to have 3 and 4 and 5 different women at one time. But as a woman growing up at that time, you're now adult, you want to make sure to hold on to your husband, because a man might leave his wife, but he's not going to leave his children. So ideally for you, you want to secure your husband. Right? So you want to find this man, marry him quick, fast, in a hurry, and get yourself knocked up. Then you're safe. Then you got a husband and you got a family. Right? And that's where we get the baby boom generation from. Here's my point. You had a change in the population of persons looking to get married very quickly. So you have the sharp increase in demand for everything associated with weddings at all income levels. Right? Poor women, they want husband too. Middle class women, they want husband too. Rich women, they want husband too. Right? Increase in everything associated with weddings. Then you have increase everything associated with kids, because you want to make sure get yourself knocked up so you can hold on to your husband. So no other woman can come along and take your husband. Right? We end up with a baby boom generation, but for our purposes here, we're talking about an enormous change in the population, and that change the demand for goods or services at all price levels. Right? I went to school in New York City, Manhattan, in the 90s, right? The height of the AIDS epidemic, right? And there was not a single party, we never stopped partying, of course, because this is college, but every party always came with a big punch bowl of condoms sitting in, what do we call it, a coffee table or a side table, because, AIDS. But the other part of that is that familiar with New York City, Manhattan, You have lower Manhattan, East Village, Greenwich Village, Soho, that sort of thing. All right. Very big artistic community. Also very big gay community. And there is a correlation between artists and homosexuality. Correlation, I don't know, there's no causation, I've never heard anyone say, but there's a correlation there. There just seems to be somehow, I don't know. All right. I don't know enough to say, but there seems to be a correlation. Point is, the AIDS community impacted the artistic community particularly hard. So you would go in areas of New York City, the downtown area. When I said downtown, I don't mean, when we think of downtown, we think, where all the shops is, but in the village, Greenwich Village area, and you would have apartment buildings where every other apartment is vacant because somebody died. And if you know Manhattan, that just doesn't happen, vacancies like that. The point we're trying to make is that you had a severe decline in the population of artists in the Manhattan area in the late 90s. So all of these stores that catered to the artistic community, whether you're talking painters, sculptors, modelers, whatever it is that they do, musicians, etc., the demand for goods and services from those persons declined because the population declined. Nothing to do with the price. Demand fell because population changed. Okay. Then we have tastes and preferences. And whether you like it or not, tastes and preferences is driven by advertising, both positive advertising and negative advertising. We like to think that our tastes are not affected and our preferences are not impacted by advertising, but it is. And I can prove it to you. Most Bahamians call every sport utility vehicle, every SUV, they call it a Jeep, right? Regardless. All right? I drive an Explorer. People always refer to my car as a Jeep. Right? It doesn't matter what SUV you're driving, Bahamians call it a Jeep. Now, Jeep is a brand name, and Jeep is very happy for you to call everything a Jeep because they get their name out there. But you can see how this is driven by advertising. For a long time, Bahamians called every dish detergent Joy. Right? Every powder cleanser was Ajax. Regardless of what's on the label, we call every denim jeans. Right. Jean Company is perfectly happy for that, and it's all about advertising. I'll give you an even better example. Right. Any ladies here who are married, I can almost guarantee you that your engagement ring was a diamond. And any of the guys here who are married, and you purchase an engagement ring for that sweetie of yours, you got a diamond. Why diamonds? Why not some other stone? Now, occasionally, there would be a woman who wants a different stone for an engagement ring. And she would have to tell you, I want my birthstone. And she would have to reiterate that to you and remind you of that. Make sure you don't forget that. I tell you over and over again to make sure that you have it in your mind that that's what she wants for sure, for sure, for sure. And if there's ever any doubt, you go with the diamond. Diamonds are a girl's best friend. Advertising. Yeah. Say you'll marry her all over again. Advertising. A forever diamond. Advertising. There is a South African diamond mining company called De Beers, Debeers. Up until the 1930s, they produced predominantly industrial diamonds. They don't look like diamonds, just hard for industrial use. But they also produce what they call coronation diamonds. These are diamonds, 5, 6, 10, 15 carats. Okay, maybe 15 carats aren't a little much. They go to kings and maharajas and sheikhs and the ultra super mega rich. But De Beers found that it had an increasing inventory of diamonds that fell between the two. They were really too good to be considered industrial diamonds, but they weren't good enough to be coronation diamonds, to be in somebody's crown. Right? So what is the company going to do? Well, you hire some advertising firm from Madison Avenue in New York, and you say, create me a campaign that will allow me to sell these mid-price diamonds, anywhere from half a carat to 5 carats. So the advertising company, I'm trying to remember the name, and it slips my memory for a moment. All right. They designed a campaign that says, listen, if you really love this woman, all right, your love is rock solid and it's forever. Nothing is harder than a diamond. A diamond is a symbol of your forever love for this woman. If you really love her, buy her a diamond engagement ring. But they went one step further and says, listen, you want to demonstrate to her just how important she is to you, just how valuable she is to you, as valuable as a diamond. And if you truly love her, you'll be willing to commit at least 2 months' salary to the purchase of her engagement ring. That diamond should cost you at least 2 months' salary. Now, I don't care who you are, poor, middle, or rich, you can feel 2 months' salary. Right. I bought my wife a diamond engagement ring. Right. I borrowed money to buy that ring because the problem, my wife knows the story I'm telling you all. She actually was in one of my economic classes. So she knows. So she was expecting the 2 months. So I was, stuck. But the point is, now this advertising campaign was so successful that from the 50s forward, almost any woman anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, North America, South America, Caribbean, Europe, if you're going to get engaged, the preference is for a diamond. And only because of advertising. If you ever have a time to have a conversation with your grandparents, right, you didn't get engaged like that. You wrote a letter to her daddy, and if you really want to seal the deal, you purchased a watch. In much of Asia, even today, the preferred stone is an emerald, because for most Asian cultures, the green is a symbol of good luck. Good luck. Advertising. And as I mentioned earlier, those advertising campaigns continue, tell you marry all over again. So now you have a diamond wedding band. Right? Then you have the three diamond pendant for yesterday, today, and forever. Yeah. And it goes on and on. What I'm trying to indicate to you is that whether we're conscious of it or not, a lot of our tastes and preferences is being driven by advertising. All that means is that we have an increase in demand or a decrease in demand for a good or service based on advertising. Is the reason why you have public service announcements. Right? the negatives of smoking. Saw something on television yesterday. I'm sure I've seen it many times before. Very pretty girl. They show just a still picture of her, probably in her early 20s. Yeah, but the voiceover is a very raspy voice. Clearly somebody who is near the end. And she's saying that, you know, I wish I had never started smoking. I wish I'd never picked up a cigarette. I wish I'd passed it by. And then they changed the shot to this woman, yeah, and it's no longer this very pretty girl anymore. It's this woman who doesn't have any hair. Her throat is all sunk in. Her face is all scrunched up. She looks like a skull, and she has this thing she's trying to talk through her throat. Yeah. And the idea is that this is a negative advertising. It's trying to discourage people, especially young people, from smoking. Negative advertising. Taste and preferences driven by advertising. And finally, expectation of future prices. So what we're saying is that there is a possibility that there's an increase or decrease in our demand for a good or service today, even though the price doesn't change today, if we expect the price to change at some point in the future. If consumers expect price to rise in the future, demand for that good or service may rise today. So you're saying, I want to get in there now before the price goes up. Similarly, if consumers expect price to fall in the future, demand may fall today. And you say, you know what? I know price is just going down next week or tomorrow. I can hold off until then. So even though the price doesn't change today, because we expect price to change in the future, our demand for that good or service changes today. Expectation of future prices. So to recap, so when we're talking about factors that affect demand, let's put price aside for the moment. We say income. As income goes up or goes down, demand for goods or services goes up or go down. That has nothing to do with price. Right? You lose your job. You know for sure your demand for some goods or service are going to fall. Because you're going to have to sit down and decide how much of this stuff I actually really need. Right? And it may also be that demand for even essential services fall. You may decide, you know what, I'm going to change from my child in private school to public school. I'm going to change from postpaid to prepaid services. I'm going to start now allowing my children, but leaving the fridge door open. My demand for things, for services is fallen because my income fell. The price of these things doesn't necessarily have to change, but because my money is short now, demand is going to fall. Then we talk about associated or related goods, substitutes and complements. If I used to get Aunt Jemima syrup all the time, every week, now all of a sudden they're going to raise the price, and continue to raise the price. I decide, you know, I'm going to switch from Aunt Jemima to some bargain brand. And the children better eat this regardless. Right. So substitutes, complements, goods that are consumed together. Right. They're going to raise the price of that Aunt Jemima syrup, so I am buying that syrup. If I am buying that syrup, I am buying the pancake batter because it makes no sense. What I can buy the batter for if ain't no syrup to go with it? Those two goods we consume together. Then we said population. If there's a change in population, then demand for that good or service also changes regardless of the price. Taste and preferences driven by advertising, both positive advertising and negative advertising affects our taste and preferences. And finally, expectation of future prices. If we expect prices to go up in the future, we want to get in there now before that price goes up. If we expect price to fall in the future, we hold off and say, you know what, I can wait until that price drops. Okay. Now, the last item on demand that we want to cover today before we move to supply is very clearly being able to distinguish between change in quantity demanded versus change in demand. And let me see if I can do this. Let's see if I can make this bigger. Okay. Now, let's start with change in quantity demanded. If the amount that people are willing to consume of a good or service changes due entirely to a change in the price, we call that a change in quantity demanded. If there is an increase or decrease in the amount that people are willing to consume based purely on the price level, we call that a change in quantity demanded, and graphically, we see that as a movement along the demand curve. Okay, so let's take a look at this first graph. First picture, it's a demand curve. You see we've labeled it QD, and it's downward sloping. And in this graph, we see on the vertical axis is price, P. On the horizontal axis, we have our quantity, Q. The price starts at P0. And at P0, we wanted to demand Q0. That's how much we wanted to consume when the price was P0. And on our demand curve, we mark that point as point X. That's how much, at that price, that's how much we would want to demand. Now, when the price went up from P0 to P1, the law of demand says price goes up, we expect quantity demanded to go down. So we see where demand went from Q0 to Q1, it fell. Going to the left becomes smaller. So when price went up from P0 to P1, quantity demanded went from Q0 to Q1. So in essence, we moved from the point X on our demand curve to the point Y on our demand curve. We have moved along the demand curve. When price went up, quantity went down, and we moved from point X to point Y. In essence, we have moved along the demand curve. So if there's a change in the amount that we're willing to consume based purely on a change in the price level, we refer to this as a change in quantity demanded, and we show this as a movement along the demand curve. So those three things go together. If there's a change in amount that we're willing to consume based purely, solely, just on the price, we refer to that as a change in quantity demanded. And we show that as a movement along the demand curve. That's why all we've talked about so far is change in quantity demanded, because we were talking about the change in amount that we're willing to consume based purely on a change in the price. On the other hand, if there's a change in the amount that we're willing to consume based on any other variable, the ones that we talked about, income, related goods, substitutes, complements, population, taste, and preferences, expectation of future prices, if there's a change in demand based on any of those other variables, we refer to that as a change in demand. Not a change in quantity demanded, we refer to that as a change in demand. And graphically, we see that as a shift in the demand curve. So let's look at that second graph. We start off our initial demand, demand function is the furthest one to the left, the slanted line furthest to the left. Our initial price was P, and our initial quantity was Q0. So far, you with me? At P and Q0, where it touches our demand curve, that's where we started. All right. And so let's say, what could have happened? We found oil somewhere down in Argo Way. So we now, government, got some revenues from these oil producers and gave every Bahamian adult a check for $5,000. What do you think is going to happen to demand for all goods and services? For cheap goods and services, because there's some people still cheap, mid-price goods and services, expensive goods and services, the price is going to go up for all of them. Sorry, not the price, sorry. Demand is going to go up for all of them. Which means that the entire demand curve is going to go up. It's going to shift to the right. So when you have, so even though the price still stays at P, demand went from Q0 to Q1 because people have more money to spend. If people have more money to spend, they start buying, income went up, so demand went up at that price level. And it will be the same for every price level. People are just gonna wanna buy more stuff because they got more money. So if there's a change in the amount that we're willing to consume due to any other variable besides price, even if it's not a variable on our list, any other variable besides price that caused demand to cause the amount that we're willing to consume to change, we refer to that as a change in demand. And we see that as a shift in the demand curve. Okay. Let me give you a scenario. We have a report comes out from Ministry of Health. And Ministry of Health says that we found that eating red meat is even worse for you than we had previously indicated. What's going to happen to demand for red meat? Clearly, it's going to fall.
It's gonna drop.
What about demand for, I don't know, ground beef?
Gonna go down.
What about demand for steaks?
Drop,
What about demand for beef ribs?
drop.
So regardless, and here we're saying, regardless of whether you're talking about premium high-end steaks, medium price steaks, or cheap steaks, demand for all steaks are going to fall. You would agree. Similarly, for all types of red meat at any price level. So demand is going to fall for these items regardless of the price. Because you have, in this case, negative advertising that has caused consumers to want to demand less and less of this item. Does that make sense? All right. So that's what we're talking about. Let me fix my graphs back. Don't mind. Oh, this is a good one. Look at the graph on the right. What happened to demand for COVID masks after February 2020? Didn't matter whether you were talking about cheap handmade COVID masks, whether you're talking about a little better quality COVID mask, whether you're talking about the H1N1 COVID mask, demand for all COVID masks, all price COVID masks went up because people didn't want to get sick. So we saw this shift in demand for COVID masks of all price levels. We also saw, well, because more people wanted COVID masks. We talked about taste and preferences being driven by advertising. We also talked about taste and preferences for diamond engagement ring being driven by advertising. Associated goods. Right. Future prices. We see this a lot in gas prices. Right. And so if you expect gas prices to go up tomorrow, you're going to find a reason to put gas in your car today so that you don't have to before the price goes up tomorrow. The reverse is true. If you expect price of gas to go down tomorrow, even though your car low, you're gonna hold off getting gas until tomorrow. That's what we're talking about, where demand for an item is being driven by something other than price. And we refer to that as a change in demand, and we see that as the whole demand curve either shifting in or out. What we'll do on Wednesday, I will put together a series of scenarios, and I'll send them to you, or maybe I just put them online here. And I'll send them to you so you have them in front of you. And we try and walk our way through them. It's the kind of thing that you will see in your second homework, and certainly the kind of thing you will see in the exam you're going to take in this class. And you would have to look at this scenario and I try and identify exactly whether we're talking about change in demand or change in quantity demanded, and whether or not that's going to cause the demand curve to shift in or shift out. Okay. And lastly, when we talk about demand, this is the demand function that we constructed previously. Let me remind you, QD 20 minus 4P. See, QD 20 minus 4P. So I'm not trying to slip anything by you. Same demand function based on the same demand schedule. Right. So the question now, though, is how do we go about using this? Right. So given the demand function that we derived from our previous example, we should be able to ask and answer a number of questions, hint, hint, homework exam, as it relates to the relationship between price and quantity for this product or service. So, based on our previous discussion, if price was not an issue, how much of this product would consumers demand? Well, we talked previously, we said that would be what we call autonomous consumption. And we would see that immediately to the right of the equal sign, so the answer would be 20. Right? If price was not an issue, and if you see language like that, and it's a kind of language that you're going to come across quite frequently, if price was not an issue, how much would you want to consume? It's the same language when some taxi drivers try to swing you. Right? And they tell you, well, give me whatever you feel like. Well, I don't feel like giving you anything. If you see the wording like this, if price was not an issue, in your head, you immediately translate that to mean price equals zero. Because if price truly was not an issue, why would you pay anything for it? Okay. So if price was not an issue, so they're telling us if price was zero, how many units of this product would consumers demand? All right. Second question, at what price would consumers choose not to buy any of this product? Third question, given a specific price, how many units would be demanded? Given a specific quantity, what price should be charged? And finally, assuming we could price the product in specific quantity monetary units, how would we determine how much people actually want to buy? Because we don't often see the price in whole dollar amounts. We see it in increments, 10 cents, 25-cent increments, 99 cents. So the kinds of questions that you will need to answer would be, if price is not an issue, how much would people want? How high does the price need to go before people decide they don't want none at all? If you give me a specific, if I give you a specific price, can you tell me how much people would actually buy this product? And if I tell you I want to sell a certain amount, can you tell me what price I need to charge to sell that amount? So let's take each one of these types of questions and answer them in the format that we will need to make it as easy for ourselves as possible. The way you would address these questions is in a systematic form, right? So that regardless of the question, if you stick to, okay, this is the step-by-step process to address these questions. So no matter how he tried to switch it up and twist and turn and get cute, I know these are the steps I need to take to answer these questions. As long as I follow the step-by-step method, whatever answer I get to has to be the right answer. Or he has to explain to me why it's something different. All right. So these are the 5 types of questions, 6 types of questions, 5 types. So let's walk our way through each type and how would we go about answering them. So the first question, let me go back and you see, the first question, if price was not an issue, how many units of this product would consumers demand? So if price was not an issue, I have it in red, how many units of this product would consumer demand? So how do we go about answering this? So first things first, if you see over to the right, step 1, we construct a box. And eventually this is going to become second nature to us, but certainly as we start off, it helps us because the box allows us to identify 2 unknowns. All right. And to answer any question, you must figure out what you're being asked for and what you're being given. Because if you look at our demand function, it says a QD and a P. And looking at the function, that means there are 2 unknowns in this function. We don't know what Q is, and we don't know what P is. So any question that's being presented to you, right, you cannot solve both unknowns at the same time. So the question must give you one of those unknowns and ask you to find the other unknown. So that's why we have our box. Our box allows us to identify one of the unknowns and figure out what is the unknown that we're being asked to solve. So if the question says, if price was not an issue, how many units of this product would consumers demand? So first things first, you look at that question, you write up your box and it says, okay, what am I being asked for and what am I being given? So based on the question, what am I being asked for and what am I being given? Right? This is where I'm going to ask you to crank up your audio. In the question, what are you being asked for? The question said, if price was not an issue, how many units of this product would consumers demand?
How much would consumers buy or get?
You're being asked for a quantity demanded, right? How much would consumer demand? So quantity. So in your box, you put a question mark next to quantity. So that tells you that, okay, I know for sure that's what he's being asked. That's what he's asking me for. It must mean then that somewhere in the question, he is giving me a price. Because he can't give me two unknowns. So if he's asking me for quantity, then somewhere in the question, he must be giving me a value for P. And we just said, based on the way this question is phrased, if price was not an issue, you wouldn't pay anything. That means price would be equal to 0. Right? That's the first thing you do with your box. Okay. Step 2 then says, okay, we take our equation and we plug in what we know and we solve for what we don't know. What we do know from the question is that P is equal to 0. And we also know that we're being asked for quantity. So we know we need to find quantity. Word of advice right at the beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, treat 0 like a real number. 0 doesn't mean nothing, at least not in the common vernacular. 0 is a number. So you plug it in like you would plug in any regular number. Okay? Because people too often, students, ignore 0 as if it's not important. So if you look at our working, which is in blue, right? So we have our original equation, Q equals 20 minus 4P. And I always suggest that you always rewrite the original equation before you start working on it, because it sort of centers you. And we know that P is equal to 0. So we stick 0 in the place of P. Wherever we see P in our equation, we plug in 0 because we know, based on our question, that P is equal to 0. So we end up with the equation 20 minus 4 times 0. The 0 is in brackets. So QD equals 20 minus 0, because what's 4 times 0? 0. Right. So we end up with QD equals 20. So even though we knew, based on our understanding of the construction of this equation, that our autonomous consumption, the amount people want to consume if price was not an issue, was going to be 20, we now have a step-by-step methodology for solving that question. Because that becomes important, because it won't always be 0. So the first type of question you're going to get is something like that. If price is not an issue, how many units would consumer demand? What about the second type of question? The second type of question says, at what price would consumers choose not to purchase any units of this product? Right? So, at what price would consumers choose not to purchase any units of this product? We construct our box exactly as before. And the question is, what are we being asked for and what are we being given? Anyone? What are we being asked for?
At what price are consumers not willing to purchase the product?
So we're being asked for a price, right? Because they asked us at what price. So you put question mark next to price, and that means somewhere in the question, they must have given us a value for quantity. And if they said consumers do not want to purchase any, it must mean that quantity demanded is 0. Consumers are not demanding anything. So again, we put that into our box and we go to our equation. Our equation QD equals 20 minus 4P in blue, and we plug in, we know from our box that QD equals 0, so we plug in 0, like we would plug in any ordinary number. All right. What we don't want to just put there is that we ignore the 0 altogether and just say 20 minus 4P and we try to solve it. All right. It might work in some circumstances, in this particular circumstance, it would, but it would not work if that number is something else. So we want to make sure that we establish a methodology that would work for any type of question that we're faced. So we plug in 0. Now, do you remember from your high school days how to move things from one side of the equal sign to the other? Or your introductory mathematics courses? Right?
Yes.
So if you're moving from one side of the equal sign to the other, the sign changes.
A plus.
So we want, because we're trying to solve for price, because if we look at our box, we're trying to find a value for P. What we have is a negative 4P. So first of all, we want to move that P to the other side so it becomes positive, because we know prices are never negative. So we want our price to be positive. So to do that, we move the 4P over. We can't just move the P by itself because the P is not unencumbered. It's 4P. It's not any P, it's 4P. So we have to move the whole 4P over, and it now becomes positive 4P. The 20 stays where it was, and we end up with 4P equals 20. All right, how do we get P by itself? Well, if we divide 4P by 4, the 4's cancel out, and we end up with P by itself. But this equal sign says that both sides of this equation are equal to each other. And that means whatever you do on one side, you have to do on the other side. So to get the P by itself, if we divide the left side by 4, which allows us to cancel that out to get P by itself, we also have to do the right side by 4. All right. So let's see, I didn't want to mess it up, but let's see. I hope I can do this. It'll be 4P divided by 4 equals 20 divided by 4. All right. And the 4's cancel out. So we had a P equals 20 divided by 4, which gives us $5. All right. So at a price of $5, using our methodology, we said if they raise their price to $5, demand falls to 0 as in our box. And if we go back up to our way here, our demand schedule, we see at a price of $5, demand is 0. So far, we think what we've done is correct because we can go back to our demand schedule and see that, in fact, it is consistent with what we see in our demand schedule. So then, third type of question. If you're given a specific price, how many units would be demanded? So you're being asked for a price. So I construct my box. And I know I put a question mark next to my Q because I want to remind myself that that's what I'm trying to figure out. That means somewhere in the question, they must give me a price. And the question tells me that at a price of $2.25, that's the price that we're charging. How many of this item will people want to buy at $2.25 a piece? Same methodology. I start off with my function. And I plug into that function what I know. And I know from the question that P is $2.25. So instead of P, I put 225. I substitute the P, the 225 for the P. So I end up with an equation that says QD equals 20 minus 4 times $2.25. And 4 times $2.25, 4, if you doubt me, pull out your calculator. 4 times 2.25 is 9. Right. 4 2s are 8, and 4 25s, 25, 50, 75, $1. That gives me $8 plus $1 here, gives me 9. So quantity demand then is 20 minus 9, 11. So at a price of $2.25, people want to demand 11 units. Now this becomes important because if we go back to our demand schedule, we can't see $2.25 because our demand schedule is only in whole numbers. So the demand function allows us a lot more flexibility to see what would happen at any price level, not just at these whole numbers that our demand schedule shows us. Our demand function allows us to determine how much people are going to demand at any price level. So this is what the major supermarkets do all the time. Their cash registers are actually computers, and it produces a printout back at the head office. And the printout says at various price levels, how much of these would people want to buy based on what we've seen over the last week, 2 weeks, month, 3 months, 6 months, a year. So at a price of $2.25, we're able to determine that people are going to want to buy 11 units. So the next type of question that you're going to face as a store owner, I want to know if I put X amount of boxes of this item on the shelf, and I want by the end of the week to have sold all of it, what is the recommended price I need to charge if I am going to sell all of these units? So given a specific quantity demanded, and in this case, QD3, what price should we charge? You always start, you create your box and you say, okay, what am I being asked for and what am I being given? From the question, I can see I'm being asked what price should be charged. So I'm being asked for a price. So in my book box, I put a question mark next to price, and that helps me because I know that somewhere in that question, there must be a quantity demanded. And the question is fairly clear here. It tells me I want to sell 3 cases of this item. So what price I need to charge if I'm going to sell 3 cases of this item by the end of the week. So as usual, our methodology says we put down our function first, and then we plug into that function what we know and then solve for what we don't know. We know that quantity demanded is 3 based on the question. That's how much we want to sell. 3 cases, 3 boxes, 3 crates, 3 cartons, whatever it is, it's 3. So we plug in that 3 and we end up with an equation that goes 3 equals 20 minus 4p. Then we decide, okay, I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I like my prices to be positive because I never see a negative price in any supermarket in my life. So I need to make my price positive. So I move my P over to the left and I move that number. I collect all my numbers together. So I take that 3 and put it on the other side. My negative 4p now becomes positive 4p. Because it's a positive number, I don't need to put a plus sign in front of it. And that 3, when I move it over, is no longer positive because I move it to the other side of the equal sign. It now becomes minus 3. So after rearranging my function, I end up with something that looks like 4p equals 20 minus 3. So 20 minus 3 is 17. They're all numbers. So I could put them together. So 4p equals 17. So p is equal to 17 divided by 4. And unless my math is very wrong, and at this level, it ain't gonna be wrong, $4.25. Because we're asking for a price, we have to put it in dollar units, $4.25. So if I wanted to sell 3 boxes of this, 3 crates of this, 3 pallets of this item, I cannot charge more than $4.25. $4.25, I will get to sell exactly 3 units. And now it gets a little tricky. All right. Let's assume that for whatever reason, all right, I only price this item in 25-cent increments. That means I can price this item in $1, $1.25, $1.50, $1.75, or $2. Does that make sense? 25-cent increments.
Yes.
So, question, assuming that we can only price this product in specific monetary increments, 25 cents, for example. It could be in 10 cents, but in this case, 25 cents. How do we determine if a given specific quantity, how do we determine, how do we determine price if we are given a specific quantity demanded? So here's the question you're given. What is the maximum price you can charge to the nearest 25 cents and still sell at least 11.5 units? That's your question. What is the maximum price we can charge to the nearest 25 cents and still sell at least 11.5 units? Now, you first get this question, and your first reaction is say, some expletive that amounts to say what? Then you remember Mr. Mayor telling you, relax. Follow your procedures. Follow your methodology. What is the first thing you do? You construct your box. And then you say, what am I being asked for? And what am I being given? Right? You start off with what you know, and then we figure out the rest. Right? I know my methodology. My methodology says I construct my box. And I ask, what am I being asked for? And what am I being given? And then I go to my question. What is the maximum price? And I don't know about that maximum part, but it sounds like he's asking for a price, right? For absolute sure, he's at, what is the price? So I put a question mark next to the price in my box. Now, they said we can charge another 25 cents and still sell at least all of that I don't know about, but I see also, once I've determined what is he asking me for? He's asking me for a price that I know somewhere in the question, he must be giving me a quantity. And since I know 25 cents is not a quantity, the only quantity it looks like is 11.5 units, right? All in there is we're going back to our methodology. No matter how messy or complicated the question looks, go back to my methodology. My methodology says, what am I being asked for and what am I being given? I'm being asked for a price, so I put question mark next to P in my box, and I'm being given, because I don't see anything else, 11.5 units. I put 11.5 for my quantity. My next step in my methodology says what? I put down my function, plug in what I know, and solve for what I don't know. I will figure out the rest eventually, but first things first, I'm going to follow my methodology. So at the very least, I get some points for following the steps that he told us to follow. So put on my equation, 20 minus 4p. Plug in what I know. I know from the question that P is 11.5. I end up with an equation that says 11.5 equals 20 minus 4P. I move my price to the left because I want my price to be positive. Then I collect my number, so I move that 11 and a half over to the right. That turns out to be negative. So now I end up, once I've rearranged my equation, I end up with 4P equals 20 minus 11.5P. So far, so good?
Yes.
Now I need to solve for P. So 20 minus 11 and a half gives me 8 and a half. So 4P equals 8 and a half. So P equals 8 and a half divided by 4. P equals 2.125. All right, so my methodology brings me to that point. Now, once I got to that point now, I said, okay, at least I have banked some grades. Now I need to figure out the rest of this mess in this question. Because the question says stupid things like maximum price and nearest 25 cents and still sell at least 11 and a half units. That's I have to figure out. At the very least, I get that first piece down. So then, all I've done here, I've recreated our calculation from the previous example, the previous slide. I'm 2 and a quarter. We got over the answer P equals 2 and a quarter, 2.125. Now, our answer comes out to $2.12.5. Right, that's what it means. $2.12.5. We don't round it yet because you never round it until you get to the end. However, the man tells us that he is pricing his product in 25-cent increments, and 12.5 cents is not 25-cent increments. So that means that we need to adjust our price either up to $2.25 or down to $2. Because look, 12.5 cents is exactly halfway between $2.25 and $2 even. You realize that, don't you?
Yes.
So right now, you don't have any incentive to either go up or down. Right? But you know it has to be either $2.25 or $2, because those are the two nearest to our $2.12.5. Now, but only one of them is right. The answer is either $2.25 or it's $2. How do you go about figuring out which is the right answer? Right. The way you would do that is you test both answers, both the $2.25 and the $2. Test both of them and see if one of them can tell you what is the right answer. So here we've tested both. Here I've recreated P equals $2.12.5. We've kept that because that's our reference. Right. Now, we said we have two possible answers, $2.25 or $2. So to test both, we take each one of those and plug that back into our original function. Let's start with the $2.25. P equals 225, so we go back to our original function and plug in at 225. Our original function, if you recall, was QD equals 20 minus 4P. Right. That was our original function. Let me put it here as well. Too far. QD equals 20 minus 4P. All right. So here's our original function, and we plug in 225 in one function and $2 in the other function. Because remember, we're trying to test both possible answers. So when we plug in 225 and we solve it, 4 times 225 is 9. 20 minus 9, we have QD equals 11. And when we plug in the $2, 20 minus 4, 4 times 2 is 8. 20 minus 8 is 12. So we end up at QD equals 11 and QD equals 12. Go back to our question. Our question says, what's the maximum price we can charge to the nearest 25 cents and still sell at least 11.5 units? So how many units that we need to sell?
11.5.
11.5. How much units will we sell if we charge $2? We sell 12. You see, if we were to charge $2, we sell 12. If we were to charge $2.25, we sell 11. How much do we need to sell? We need to sell 11.5. Charging $2.25 will not get us to our sales goal. We need to sell at least 11.5. You see, they said at least 11. So we can sell more than 11.5. We just can't sell less than 11.5. If I say you need to go at least 5 steps down the road, stopping at 4.5 steps isn't the answer. Now you could go 5.5, 6.5, you could go 50 steps down the road. But I'm saying you need to sell at least 11 units. A lot of small stores run into this issue when you have to meet payroll. And listen, I need to sell at least 11 units to make enough money to meet my weekly payroll. Selling 11 units is not going to make me enough money to meet my weekly payroll. I need to sell at least 11.5. Yeah. Selling 12 is great. That's gravy. 13, wonderful. 15, amazing. But I know I need to sell at least 11.5. So don't come to me and tell me we only sold 11. So the correct answer then has to be $2, because it's only at $2 that we're able to meet at least 11.5 of our sales unit. All right. I'm cleaning everything back up the way it was. Okay. All right. So I would want to stop there. All right. My clock says 11:21. Okay, so we almost hit our 8:30 mark. Let's say 8:21. All right. So what I will do for next class, 2 things. We will have some scenarios. So we look at whether a demand curve, we're shifting demand curve and moving us along the demand curve based on those scenarios. And we will have a number of these questions. So we'll work our way through so we get a feel for doing them on our own before we are faced with homework. Okay? Also, next class, we'll begin talking about everything we did today, we will do for supply. So if you want to read ahead, that's perfectly fine. All right. Any questions before we wrap it up?
Yes, Mr.
I know
Mayor.
it's a lot to take in, but I promise you it will get easier the more you practice. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. For the homework, that's due on Monday morning.
Sorry, before 6 p.m.
Before 6 p.m. And it could be.
Did I say 6 a.m.?
No. I just was confirming. It can be emailed to the email you provided earlier, correct?
Yes, both Central Bank and my personal email, both of them, please, just in case if for whatever reason one of them goes haywire.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I also have a question, Mr. Demare. The PPC is at the bottom of the homework. Those are to be explained as well?
Oh, no. The homework says, the diagrams are on page 2.
Okay.
They should help you in terms of your analysis.
Okay.
In terms of answering the question.
Okay.
So what we're saying is that, okay, when you look at your question, and you said, okay, you're not necessarily saying number 4 on the bottom sheet. You know, I guess you could do that if you wish, but you would want to do more, you have to do more explanation, but just telling me, you know, D in the bottom sheet answers the question. That's not going to get too much marks. All right. Anything else? All right. In that case, then, thank you very much. I know we went, actually, we come close to our ideal time for wrapping up. All right. I appreciate the time, and we'll see you guys on Monday.
Monday.
All right. Any other questions? You certainly can WhatsApp me. That's probably easier than emailing me. Unless you have a very long question, then email probably works. All right. Thank you very much, folks. You all have a good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good night.
Good night.